So, a warm welcome to our viewers today. Today, we're going to be talking about frameworks that are driving infrastructure growth in South Africa. I'm Nigel Mercer from APMG International, and we've got a great panel of people today. We're going to meet them in a few minutes. But infrastructure growth is vital to a strong economy as it supports businesses, connects workers to jobs, facilitates the movement of goods and services, and ultimately drives economic growth and improves the quality of life. Now, South African government is pursuing policies to achieve rapid, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth. And the South African finance minister said late last year in his mini budget speech that investing in infrastructure in South Africa is necessary to support higher levels of growth and expanded access to quality basic services. Yet the quality of public sector infrastructure spending is suboptimal, and the quantity is just inadequate. So as a result, existing infrastructure is deteriorating. Backlogs are growing. The cost of providing infrastructure is high. Now, that represents obviously both a challenge and an opportunity. Now, part of the solution will be to ensure that all infrastructure projects are well thought through, the business cases are well defined, funding is properly secured, and most importantly, those projects are actually delivered successfully. Now, Shanice, Alanis, and Ella are all over in the social chat, so please let them know your name and the city you're joining from. This is an interactive event, everybody, so get involved in the chat. If you've got any questions for the panel, please feel free to enter them into the chat, and our team will get them over to the panel to answer live while we're on air. So today we've got a great panel of people, so let's jump right in and meet them. Hi, everyone. Really, really good to have you all here. I'm just going to walk around and do some introductions quickly. So first off, I'd like to introduce Brendan Sherry. He's part of the National Infrastructure and Service Transformation Authority, which is called NISTA. They've recently rebranded to this, by the way. Brendan's been there since about 2019 and managed the global infrastructure program, adapting UK project methodologies, including the 5-case model and project initiation route map for international use. Welcome, Brendan. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, Nigel. Great to be here. Thanks.
Fantastic. Andre Kruger is the CEO and head of trainer at PPP Training Online. And I think since 2017, PPP Training Online has delivered over 500 infrastructure practitioners through its CP3P qualification. Andre has a background in banking, though, and extensive experience in public sector credit risk, including structuring and evaluating the risks of PPP transactions. Welcome, Andre. Great to have you on board.
Nigel, thank you very much for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be on screen today. So looking forward to learn as well.
Fantastic. Etienne Shardlow is currently the CEO of Symphonise Consulting, where he focuses on making a positive impact through the company's portfolio of training and consulting services. Safe to say, Etienne's got nearly 30 years' experience in the project management and IT service management world. And I think his focus is really on strategic alignment between business and IT. Great to have you on board, Etienne.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. And lastly, Ekow Coleman, he's an APMG certified PPP professional and principal infrastructure investment officer at the African Development Bank. Now, he leads the coordination and implementation of the bank's PPP framework from 2021 upwards, and its PPP transaction advisory services. So really good to have you on board, Ekow, and thanks for joining the event as well.
It's a pleasure, Nigel, and a pleasure to meet the rest of the panel. Looking forward to their
fantastic.
Thank you.
Really good to have you here. Now, remember, everybody, stay on the event until the end, and you stand a chance to win one of 3 free certification exams. This is a not to be repeated APMG offer, but we will be giving away some free certification exams, 1 PPP or CP3P Foundation, 1 Praxis Foundation, 1 Infrastructure Business Foundation exam. So please, everybody, stay on and stand a good chance to win. Now, we're not going to draw names until the end. So if you're not on, you don't win, and we'll pick somebody else. Okay? So just keep that in mind. All right, everybody. I think what we need to do now is jump straight into our first question. And our first question today is, why is a well-defined infrastructure business case so important? Brendan, if you don't mind, I'm going to come to you first with this.
Thanks, Nigel. Well, infrastructure projects are really very exciting and often However, they are really complex and lengthy projects. They're really challenging, and they often carry significant risk for the responsible authority, for investors, for contractors, and the supply chain. So the process of working on a business case as a project team to define and develop a robust investment proposal is important to ensure that projects are set up correctly right from the very beginning, to give the project the greatest chance of success in delivering the intended benefits from that investment. So our infrastructure business case shouldn't be considered as just a checklist of steps that the project team is going through to try and secure budget approval, but instead it can act as a framework for thinking and a tool for the project team and their stakeholders to take an initial idea right from the concept stage through the planning, through the implementation, through procurement, all of the steps, and right through after commissioning to benefits evaluation. Importantly, the business case brings transparency to that process as well, and transparency to the investment decisions, particularly when using public funding to develop critical infrastructure projects. It provides a clear audit trail of analysis, advice, and ultimately the justification for those investment decisions. And helpfully now, and more importantly, as time goes on, we can mainstream sustainability in our business cases to ensure that we get the best economic, social, and environmental outcomes from our infrastructure investments. So a good, solid business case demonstrates to budget approvers, to investors, and to our delivery partners that the analysis and advice contained in the business case is being developed in a methodical and robust way, and it can be defended at the decisions and investment stages. And it can ensure that the implementing agency, the responsible authority, arrives at the best solution to solve the problem that they are trying to fix or to deliver those critical infrastructure services to the public.
Right. Brendan, thank you. That actually makes a lot of sense. Andre, I'm going to come to you next, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. So looking at it from a banker's perspective, it is quite important to understand, even while the business case while government is busy developing that business case, it's important to understand that the internal project team in government is sufficiently qualified, experienced to develop this business case, maybe in support of a transaction advisors. So banks takes a lot of comfort from the fact that there's a strong project team internally in a government entity, as well as a strong transaction advisory team. And that makes you as a banker following the transaction to potentially bid together with a consortium for a project. So I think Brendan explained the whole process very nicely, also including environmental issues, net zero issues comes into play. Very, very important. In South Africa, we had a specific case where the business case maybe was not as well developed, or maybe an additional aspect that need attention is a provincial government came to market with a provincial hospital that they wanted to redevelop as in a PPP procurement mode, and there was no bidders. So the problem is the business case was probably well developed, but that market testing exercise was not done well. So very few people knew about the project. So government probably have spent a few million rands in developing the business case. Everything was done well, but they didn't test the market. So there's a number of aspects related that are also important. And it's viewed as a failure by government when nobody bid for your project. So I just wanted to add that comment. Thanks.
Andre, thanks for that. And that's such a good example of how you shouldn't do it, right? Things need to be thought through from A to Z. I think one comment I want to have is that, a business case is a living, breathing thing, right? It doesn't start at the beginning of the project and never gets looked at again. It should get looked at and worked with throughout the entire project's life cycle. Okay? People don't seem to understand that. And it's an important element of developing a business case that it can be communicated and adjusted and worked with throughout the cycle of the the initiative for project, everybody. So thanks for that. Etienne, you wanted to add something to this?
Yeah, I want to jump into your comment about the business case being a living, breathing document. It's amazing how many projects I see where people will create the business case at the beginning of the project and won't look at it again. It was a good idea at the beginning of the project, but maybe the project isn't a good idea halfway through the project. Things
Right.
change. Maybe you're building classrooms in the middle of January 2020 and March 2020. Classrooms are a thing of the past. A global pandemic puts an end to the business justification for your project. And if you've got nothing if you don't update your business case, and you keep looking back at the old business case where it made sense, your project still makes sense because you haven't updated anything. And I think it's really important that at regular review points, at end of project or program stages, you look back at your business case and go, does this still make sense? Do we carry on? Do we stop?
No, you're absolutely right, Etienne. Are we still building something that's fit for purpose and actually relevant in today's world? I think the challenge becomes even more, though, when you look at a PPP, because these are very, very long-term projects at the end of the day, right? So when you start the initiation, the world has moved on in 5, 10, 15 years. So it's important to take a good look at that throughout the life cycle. Thanks, Etienne. Ekow, you've got some comments I'd like to add as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Nigel. And just to add to what other panelists have indicated, of course, most people know about feasibility studies. And of course, feasibility studies are what we call the business case that we are mentioning here. So it was just to point that out. And for us at the African Development Bank, some of the elements, of course, that we try to look out for in some of these business case or feasibility studies is the issue about, I think, gender considerations in the project. It's important. I think colleagues have mentioned sustainability issues, but of course, going to climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and how resilient that particular project are all elements that, of course, are also very important in building the business case for a project or a program. So that's just what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Ekow. That actually makes perfect sense as well. So I want to give a warm welcome to our viewers and remind everybody, if you've got a question, please feel free, just dump it in the chat, put a Q in front of it if you don't mind, so that our social team can pick it up. And we'll be taking all those questions live, okay? So get your questions in early. But I'd really like to greet a couple of folks online. There are lots and lots of folks over here. So Clement, we've got watching from Nairobi, Kenya. It's really great to have you online. We've got Ricardo. Welcome, Ricardo. Hopefully you get some value out of this, and feel free to put some info on Praxis in the chat. I'm sure everybody would appreciate it as well. Just for you, if you guys know, I know Ricardo well. He's a chartered project manager and Praxis expert as well. So really good to have you online. And Anesta, really good to have you as well. We've got lots and lots of people, and Ibrahim as well. So really good to have you, everybody online today. It'd be great if you guys just popped a couple of questions in the chat and we can get through this, and hopefully one of you is the lucky winner today of an exam. Which would be really good, wouldn't it? Okay, our next question is, what was the main driver behind building the infrastructure business cases framework? Brendan, I'm going to come to you because obviously you're the person who was involved with this. Tell us about it.
Sure, thanks, Nigel. So the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, which is the predecessor to what we are today, NISTA, and other predecessor organisations from the UK government, has been working with partner governments around the world and international community in the infrastructure space for more than 15 years now. And it's well recognised that there is an infrastructure investment gap for critical infrastructure right around the globe. Everybody has limited resources and a long pipeline of critical infrastructure projects that they want to finance. And when talking to our partners around the world about what the challenges are to meeting this investment gap, time and time again, we heard that a lack of well-prepared business cases being brought to market or being sent to central government for financing was causing delays and bottlenecks in moving those pipelines along. In the UK, all of our business cases for central government funding use the 5-case model for business case development, often known as the better business case methodology. And it doesn't matter what sector those are for, if it's infrastructure, if it's IT transformation, or even policy development. We use that 5-case model. So the IPA took this idea of perhaps supporting our partners around the world to address the issue with quality, robust infrastructure business cases by adapting the model that we use in the UK. And we've made it specific to infrastructure projects, and we've made it accessible to international audiences, project professionals and practitioners around the world, so that they can use the same standardized approach to developing their own infrastructure project business cases. But I just want to stress that this is not just a UK methodology. This is international best practice. And viewers will note that if they look at the G20 principles for infrastructure project preparation, they will see that they map directly over to the 5-case model that we use in our infrastructure business case guidance. So the core principles of international best practice for infrastructure business case preparation are there and essential to this infrastructure guidance methodology. And the methodology can be applied in a proportional manner. So we understand that practitioners in different countries have their own regulation, their own policy situation. So it might not necessarily be a case to lift and shift. They can take the best practice elements, dovetail those into their existing context and environment, and hopefully then improve the quality and quantity of infrastructure business cases being presented to market.
Fantastic, Brendan. Thanks. Just a quick sort of follow up on that. The question is, what makes an infrastructure business case different from, let's say, a standard project business case? What are the sort of fundamental differences that you could tell us about?
So there are many things that are particular to the infrastructure business case. As I talked about, the complexity, the number of stakeholders involved, often the sums of finance required for capital, but also the operating expenditure over the whole asset life are really important points to address in that business case. A really good point brought up by the panel before about having the capacity inside government to actually manage the business case preparation process, to initiate that project, to procure that in a transparent and competitive way, and really drive value for money for those long-term investments. Might be some of the things that differentiate them, but then also viewers will be familiar with challenges around securing land, title access, etc., and the potential negative impacts of infrastructure projects on the environment and on socioeconomic considerations as well. So all of those are baked in to the infrastructure business case methodology.
Thanks, Brendan. That really, really helps. It clears a lot of misconceptions up, I think. There are quite a few differences between an infrastructure business case versus a normal project. So that's really great. Guys, we're going to move on because we've got lots of questions to get through. Next question is, what constitutes a good infrastructure business case? I mean, this can be also held true for a normal business case, right, that isn't infrastructure related. But what are the main constituents? Who would like to tackle this first? Shall I pick somebody? Andre, do you want to kick us off with this, if you're okay to?
Sure. I was just managing something quickly here.
Oh, apologies.
So a good infrastructure business case will take sort of cognizance of the sector that you are working in, as well as the rest of, so I'm in Namibia currently. We are doing training here in Namibia for the PPP unit, and et cetera, et cetera. And so whenever they develop a major or a mega project, one has got to take cognizance of the bigger budgetary environment that you operate in, the capital budget. Because within a specific sector, and maybe I can use a practical example. Let me go Lesotho. Lesotho had a PPP hospital, and that was going for a number of years. And then for various reasons, that the costs incurred by the private sector increased because of certain conditions allowed in the contract. But what it meant in practice is that the project became unaffordable for government, and they couldn't find a way out. So if I then take a step back and say what constitutes a good infrastructure business case is that you need to take account of the budgetary restrictions of a specific sector, the health sector in that case, as well as the impact on the bigger economy. And to what extent, so very large projects definitely have got a major impact on other sectors, on other related aspects. And so a good business case need to take, if I can summarize, cognizance of the broader environment, the macro environment where within this project was developed. Maybe just that point.
Right. No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Anybody else want to chip in or add to this? Brendan, maybe a little bit?
Yeah. So a good business case should stand up to that external scrutiny, and should be subjected to stakeholder input as well. So business case project teams should go out and include the views and the concerns and the interests of all, a very broad range of stakeholders. That could be from the communities that are affected by the infrastructure, but it could also be from academics. It should certainly be from industry and engagement with the supply chain, and interest groups that will have very strong interests around a whole range of social and environmental and inclusion issues that should be included in the consultation process when developing the business case. We've also talked about it being a live document, so we should revisit the early assumptions in our early business case right through the intermediate and the full business case stages before we get final approval and sign off and go ahead and sign up those contracts for construction and implementation to make sure that our early assumptions are still true, the business case stacks up financially, but also environmentally and socially as well. And we'll find in the guidance for the infrastructure business case for projects that there are 5 key questions. Each relates to one of the 5 cases of the 5-case model. We've got our strategic case, commercial case, our management case, and we've got our economic case and financial case. And making sure that all of those questions are answered in a robust way helps lead that project team through and present a business case which is strong, robust, and open to scrutiny, and gives confidence to investors.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brendan. Thanks, Andre. That really helps, I think, for everybody to understand what sort of elements you should be thinking of. And you're right. I think the 5-case model, if you're following that, it gives you a very, very good grounding, okay? And very, very solid way of thinking things through. But the living document is still a key critical element here. All right, folks, let's jump into the next question. So how do we know when a project or initiative should become a PPP? So what really is the threshold here, or the requirement? So just for the context for those people in the audience that are not really sure about this, I mean, most governments are unable to fund, certainly in our African context, are unable to fund projects without some kind of financing. Okay? And when they want to do something, financing becomes the most important thing. Obviously, having a good business case is a critical preempt for submitting a finance request, right? So getting that financing is a very important thing. So what are the real sort of, how do we know when this thing is big enough or should become a PPP? So Andre and Ekow, I think I'm going to look to both of you to answer this. Andre, if I can come to you first, and then Ekow, if that's okay.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. It is definitely a challenge for a public entity, government entity, to sort of build a project pipeline, regardless if the project is going to be procured on a traditional or a PPP procurement methodology, and then to work through this pipeline as you find more information, etc., etc., and then to decide which ones eventually could or should be procured through a PPP methodology. So I'm going to use South Africa, and I'm going to talk about power and specifically transmission lines. It's an issue in South Africa, and it's an issue across Africa currently and for the last few years already. So for many years, South Africa had a 10-year plan for transmission lines, but it was an unfunded plan for transmission lines. Now that we have started to generate more electricity through IPPs, wind and solar projects, the transmission aspect has come to the fore. 5, 6, 7 years ago, Eskom, our power utility, have said transmission lines represent a strategic asset, and that should be handled by government. We should use traditional procurement. Now that internal funding is scarce, much more scarce than previously. South Africa's borrowing capacity is very limited. Now everybody is saying, but listen, we should procure this through a PPP. Even although a few years ago we said it's a strategic asset, we shouldn't. So maybe that's an easy one out for me, is to say that most probably to procure transmission lines in South Africa currently is that PPPs represent a very attractive alternative that government could consider. So I'm not saying everything should be PPPs, but it's a very attractive option, maybe for the wrong reason, because we've got scarce capital. Everybody would know, maybe everybody does not know, that you actually do PPPs or you procure using PPPs when you, in essence, actually have the money budgeted for a specific project. Government is in its strongest position when it's actually got money in the budget to procure a project. It's at that stage that you then can consider a PPP and see if the private sector can deliver this project, operate and maintain the project over the project's life at a lesser cost than government, that value for money concept. So maybe I'm taking a shortcut here by saying transmission lines in South Africa, in Kenya, Ketraco, the transmission line company, has already decided a few years ago that it's inefficient for them to procure transmission lines on a traditional basis. As I say, maybe Ekow, I would be interested to hear what you comment in this space. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Andre.
Yeah.
Ekow, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel, and thank you, Andre, for some of those insights. And I like the point that you make about PPPs being in a situation where, of course, government should have the money. So the issue should not be just about funding issues, but being able to bring in the private sector to bring in efficiency into the operations, bring in innovation into the construction operations of the project. But I'd like to add on some other aspects in terms of course, for Africa, the infrastructure gap is huge. PPPs are being looked at to be applied in various sectors. I would like to look at the national level, at the municipal level, and then you can even have situations where we're talking of small-scale PPPs, large-scale PPPs, and many countries on the continent have come up with their own PPP frameworks and thresholds for which a project should be looked at in the PPP light. So for some countries, I'll mention this, for some countries, they say for projects that are above $50 million should be looked at for the possibility of being undertaken as a PPP. But in some other countries, that 50 million threshold also meets what we call for municipal level PPPs. So some of these projects, initiatives, whether to be PPP or not, also depends on the PPP frameworks and legal, the law act in those countries and the level of experience in some of these countries. Some countries have small economies, you have larger economies, and so what may be considered as a large PPP in South Africa, in the Gambia, for example, may be considered as a small PPP in South Africa. But at the end of the day, one of the key elements in there is that the PPP project, should be able to, of course, pay for the operations costs, to be able to pay the revenues from the project, should be able to cover operations, should be able to pay for the interest and repayment of debt, plus a return for sponsors of the project. So this is what I want to add here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andre and Ekow. I think you answered that quite clearly. I guess the short answer for everybody is it depends, right? And it varies per country. But ultimately, it's about your access to finance and whether or not you believe something should be financed, okay, before you apply. But I just want to remind everybody, a good business case is a critical first step with this. So we're going to move on because we're getting lots of live questions in now. How does a well-written infrastructure business case help when defining a project as a PPP? Brennan and Ekow, I think if you guys, perhaps one of you would like to do this. Ekow, would you like to kick this one off again?
Okay, so thank you. So for a well-written infrastructure business case, or in most African countries, this will be known as a feasibility studies. Of course, there are some of those elements from the UK business case of which Brendan and his team had prepared. We show some of those elements, but in most of the time, you need to make sure that there's that detailed, at least the demand and supply analysis of the project. It's key in defining whether the project could be undertaken as a PPP or not. Number two, I mentioned that earlier on, the revenues or cash flows that are coming from the project, would they be sufficient to cover operational costs, cover repayment of debt, interest, plus a return for the investor once the outputs are produced. The outputs here mean once the infrastructure has been constructed and is in operation. A strong economic analysis is very important, especially on the cost-benefit analysis. Issues around value for money. It's also important whether doing this as a PPP makes versus doing this as a traditional procurement or a traditional project, it makes sense or not. There was one point I think Andre had mentioned earlier on, which is very important. It's in preparing this business case, it's always good to do that market sounding, sound the markets. Here in sounding the markets, you're trying to look out for potential sponsors. What will make this project attractive to them, this project attractive to them? You need to sound lenders. What will make a lender like the African Development Bank maybe lend to a PPP project? So this feedback from the market is critical in further shaping how you finalize or prepare the business case. And of course, I think panelists have mentioned that a business case is a live document, so it doesn't just end there. So as you're preparing it at a particular point in time, once you do the market sounding, of course, you get the feedback, you further update it. Even at the procurement stage, you still get feedback from these bidders who may have bidded for a project, and they will have also further giving feedback. And all this further is needed to improve or update the business case. So I want to end here for now. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Ekow. They're very comprehensive. We've got a lot of questions stacking up now. So I'm going to move on to Etienne quickly to ask you, why is the Praxis Framework so successful in the delivery of PPPs in infrastructure projects?
I think one of the main reasons why the Praxis Framework is a popular choice for this kind of public-private partnership project is these projects tend to be quite long in terms of timelines. Also, they are very rarely standalone projects. Infrastructure projects tend to impact other projects as part of a program or part of a portfolio. And the Praxis Framework is not just a project management framework. It covers all three levels: projects, portfolios, or project programs and portfolios. And so it helps provide a level of consistency across all three layers, whereas a traditional project management methodology or tool would cover the project itself, but wouldn't give you that consistency across all three layers. And so that's one of the main reasons why I recommend frameworks, is consistency. And now you've got consistency across all three layers. And I think that's really important when you're dealing with this kind of long-term, very high-risk project.
Etienne, thanks. I have to agree with you. And I think that that's what the key player is in this. It's that consistency and the availability of the guidance, which is available, by the way, online, the Praxis Framework. Just Google Praxis Framework or go to praxisframework.org, and you'll find the entire guidance online and available for you to use. So it provides that common language, should we say, between projects, programs, and portfolios, which is so critical. These days, we're seeing that an integrated framework that defines different complexities of projects. When does a project become a program? Well, it's a complexity question, really. Okay. So it moves forward. So, folks, we've got so many questions coming in now and very little time left to run. We've only got 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to have a look here at a couple of other questions that we've got. So the next question I'm going to ask is, how should business cases in Africa account for the unique infrastructure challenges that vary significantly by region? So let's see, who would like to answer this one? Hands up, everybody. This is an interesting one. So while you guys are thinking about it, let's look at Brendan's going to save me from my own incompetence. Brendan, thank you so much.
So just speaking a little out of turn as the person speaking from the UK and perhaps the only one not sitting in Africa today, I recognize that there are unique infrastructure challenges. There are a huge variation across the continent, but business cases should address the project at hand. They should take into account the unique context and the variables, the externalities, dependencies, constraints that project is facing, and should take account of the appropriate stakeholders, including potential financial resources that are required to develop the project. So a business case is specific to the project, to the region. Of course, when you're dealing with cross-boundary projects, these become even more complicated because of legal jurisdictions, financing risks, and potential resource allocation. So I'm not trying to shy away from the fact that infrastructure projects are very complex on the continent. But to a large extent, many of those challenges face all infrastructure projects today because of the volatility of the environment that we're introducing our infrastructure investments into, and the system of infrastructure. So the climatic conditions that we're dealing with today, the demographics of today, are going to be very different in 10, 20, or 30 years at the end of the life of our assets. And the demands on critical infrastructure and the essential services that we provide, because that's what it's all about. This is about providing essential services to users. Those demands are going to be different in decades to come. So project teams have a huge challenge in designing projects, writing their business cases to address all of those. And it's important to get external help. You know, get the brains trust in the room to help and advise, give the best information to hand to shape your business cases today.
Fantastic, thank you. Ekow, your comments briefly.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. It's quite important here, especially on the African continent, and even in this case across various countries. And I want to look at this from financing side, especially when you compare Africa to Europe, North America, and Asia. We don't have a very deep capital markets here that's able to support infrastructure financing, as well as our pension funds, insurance companies. There are a bit of some restrictions also around how they get involved in infrastructure projects. The issue of infrastructure as an asset class among pension funds, insurance companies on the continent is a bit new, and so all these present challenges for the continent compared to the North America, Europe, and so in developing business cases on the continent, these are areas that certainly should be looked at in detail, and considering some of these constraints that we face on the continent. So maybe that's what I want to add here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to our next live question here from Wahoo. So this one, Wahoo says, what successful examples have you seen of public-private partnership models that effectively shared risk in African infrastructure business cases? So I think this could be quite interesting. Has anybody got any examples that we can share that effectively shared risk in this? Andre, I'm going to come to you for this one, if you don't mind. Andre, we can't hear you.
Apologies. We are in a borrowed boardroom, so we had a little bit of interruption, but apologies for that. So some examples. Maybe I should start off by saying in Africa, we've currently got approximately 500 live PPPs. So if anyone asks what are the sort of examples of successful risk sharing, there's a number of projects. The oldest water concession contract is the one in Ivory Coast that is more than 60 years old. I think many times we forget about these older models that have evolved over time. Recent projects, if we start up north in Egypt, there's a number of water projects, and we know water is an economic good. There's another question that deal with transport, energy, and water. There's a number of projects in those three sectors. The three biggest sectors in Africa where we've got successful PPPs is in the energy, power generation, more so, less transmission. And in South Africa, there's one or two distribution projects in development. So North Africa, energy, transport, water. The rest of Africa, similar, lesser projects. The activities in East and West Africa is quite many. Abidjan stand out as a very successful country developing PPPs. Then coming down south, we even have toll roads in Mozambique that has been operating for quite a period of time. Angola is new to the market. They are developing a number of new, especially water PPP projects. In Botswana, there's a major projects being or in development. Maybe just stop there for now.
Well, that's quite a few. Thank you, Andre. I think that should answer Wahoo quite successfully. I'm going to jump to the next question because we've got lots of them. So in this next question from Alejandro, post-Brexit, how has the UK adapted its infrastructure financing amid reduced EU financing, and its IPA model still a gold standard for developing nations despite funding gaps and delays? It's quite a complex, there's a lot to unpack in that question. Okay. Have changed. Brendan, you're probably best positioned to have a comment on this, at least, if you want to have a go at it.
Yeah, just briefly. So the context certainly has changed since Brexit. The UK set up the UK Infrastructure Bank after we lost access to capital finance for investment, not just in infrastructure, but across all sectors as a result of Brexit. So that ran for about 3 years now, and it's just been changed to the UK Wealth Fund. But really, that is acting as a catalyst to crowd in private sector finance, and particularly to innovative sectors. So, and not just specific to infrastructure. So, we do have not a formal private finance initiative style PPP model active at the moment, but we do have innovative financial structuring to allow investment by institutional investors in infrastructure around the UK. So we have a healthy pipeline of projects which are currently in service, and we will continue, I'm sure, to innovate in the UK government around addressing some of those finance gaps.
Perfect, fantastic. Thank you. I'm just going to move on very rapidly to the next question so we can get through as many as possible. In relation to financing, what role do pension funds and domestic investors play in financing PPPs, and what incentives are needed to enhance their participation? Ekow or Andre, either of you would like to answer this very briefly? I think I know the answer, by the way, but
I'll go give it a shot. So from a South African perspective, there's quite a number of investors, capital market investors participating in the PPP space. The rest of Africa, not so. There are definitely some movements to, especially in the larger industries, the energy industry, where insurance, private equity funds are participating. There's a number of major projects that are being supported. What can we do to increase that? Is to improve these business cases, to develop them properly, to risk mitigate properly. Obviously, also with the support of these capital market funders, to make them more attractive, so to speak. So I would stick, if I can summarize, improved business cases, more depth, more strength in those cases. Thanks.
Fantastic. I think that answers that question eloquently, most certainly. Okay, our next question is, please can you explain to me in professional terms the difference between certificate in project management and CP3P? Okay, that's an easy one. I could do this one if you want, but I guess Etienne and Andre are the two trainers in the room. Etienne, do you want to have a crack at this?
All right. Well, I'll tackle it from a Praxis Framework perspective and a project management training perspective. And again, the point that I made earlier about Praxis is it's a really good framework in that it helps you understand how to run a project and a program in a very consistent way in line with a portfolio. And, it gives a lot of detailed guidance around, managing projects from start to end, and starting with a good business case and kind of running through to benefits realization at the end, where you want to look back and see how successful the project was in delivering against what you included in that good business case.
Fantastic.
And I'm going to leave it there. And
we'll jump over to Andre for the CP3P side.
Yeah. In short, governments, project teams use project management techniques, principles, systems to develop these frameworks, to develop the business cases, the feasibility studies. So it's all done on a project management basis. So they interact 100%.
Fantastic. Let me just summarize there quickly for you. So basically, a certificate in project management is where you have learned about how projects should be managed, right? In the case of the Praxis Framework, it's about how projects and programs and portfolios are managed. So that's all about the mechanisms around, we've started a project, what are our project plans, how are we going to do this, and so on. Okay? The CP3P certificate is a little bit different to that. It has a 3-level model where you've got foundation, preparation, and execution. Now, foundation, I'm going to talk about very briefly because that determines and gives you all of the knowledge which is common to PPP. So it is going to cover all the terms, the terminology, and some basic ideas around how a PPP runs. It's not going to teach you how a project should run. That's not the purpose of this. So there are fundamental differences. And if you would like more details on that, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us and we can provide those to you. Alrighty, let's move on very rapidly here. So, how do we manage PPP projects in an environment with high volatility in interest and inflation rates? So this is obviously going to be a challenge. Ekow or Andre, I guess, in PPP side? Either you guys want to jump? Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, okay. Let me give it a shot here. Of course, this is certainly a concern on the continent regarding this, especially when you have most of the lending being in foreign currency, and then the revenues that are generated from the projects are in local currency. Of course, one way to sort of, you cannot totally be removed from this situation. One way, in my view, is certainly to encourage domestic pension funds, investment, domestic investors in these projects, local investors in these projects, strengthen local participation, of course, in these projects. For the likes of the African Development Bank, of course, we make available what we call partial risk guarantees and partial credit guarantees for some of these projects in order to mitigate some of these risks that you'll find in these projects. So maybe I'll end here. Maybe Andre will want to add on.
I'll just contribute very quickly. So maybe the easiest definition is to make use of a blended finance approach using grant funding, concessionary funding from international development finance institutions like the African Development Bank and others, bank funding, capital market funding, make use of export credit facilities. Not time to explain all of those, but to blend the various finance instruments, coupled with the risk mitigation strategies that Ekow referred to, still makes it very possible and very appropriate to develop PPPs, even although we are in a volatile economic environments.
Andre, thank you so much. Folks, we're going to have to take our last question for the day. And this is an interesting one. It says, how can we avoid overestimating economic feasibility analysis while maintaining a holistic perspective? In other words, when should viability gap funding be requested and when should projects be declined altogether? In other words, not become a PPP. Yeah. So this is an interesting question. And I chose this one because I think it's going to get the panel thinking a little bit here. Andre wants to jump in first because I think he's had first-hand experience with this.
Thank you, Nigel. So that's an excellent question. Maybe I should start off by saying that I guess 90% of all PPPs worldwide make use of viability gap funding, meaning that there's some sort of support either from government or from international grant funders that's got a vested interest in that sector, in that project, to make the project either more affordable for government or more affordable for end users. So that's the first point. Viability gap funding are being used all over the show. If I can use Namibia, where I'm currently, if you want to develop your public hospitals, instead of government using 100 million, what are we working with, Namibian dollars, to upgrade your hospitals, maybe you can just do viability gap funding and you can maybe develop 10 projects rather than only one project, meaning you gear your available funding, contribute to projects a 10%, maybe a 15% viability gap contribution. Just leave it there.
Right. Andre, that makes perfect sense. I hope that answered the question nicely. So I just wanted to take the time here to say thanks to everybody. It was really so many questions. I just want to reiterate, we won't have time to answer all of them. We have to close off now, but we will send you guys some answers, okay, to the questions we didn't get to. So don't worry about it. If you put a question in, we will get back to you with an answer. So before we close off, I'd just like to ask the panel, I'm just going to walk around the panel and get some final closing comments from you guys. Brendan, let me start with you. Do you have any final closing remarks?
I just to suggest that standardizing the approaches across governments across countries for your project preparation, but also your project management and planning processes will deliver value to governments, to practitioners, to the investors market. And so I think there's a win-win there for governments in Africa to take up that challenge.
I agree with you. Couldn't agree more. Andre, your final closing remarks?
Yeah, so the three APMG products that we have discussed today certainly will add a lot of value. Well, firstly, to use the 5-pillar model to develop pipelines and prioritize projects within the pipelines. It helps you to decide also, should this project be procured as a PPP or maybe just using a traditional procurement methodology. And then once you have made those decisions, to use project management, to use the Praxis to develop the project. So it was an exciting session. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Etienne, closing remarks from you?
Yeah, I just want to kind of support Brendan's comments about needing consistency and standardization. And one of the things I like about these particular methodologies and frameworks is that they give you consistency, but they also give you flexibility. You know, we need the flexibility as well as the consistency, and that's what I love about these products.
Totally agree with you there, Etienne. Thank you. Ekow, your final closing comments.
Yeah, so thank you, Nigel. So for me, I think African governments in the infrastructure space should look to these frameworks that we've discussed here today, the infrastructure business case, of course, the Praxis, together in trying to, for every project that they'll be getting involved in, be it a PPP, be it a traditional finance project, there's that tendency that it is only when it comes to privately financed projects that some of these tools probably seems to be used. And when it comes to infrastructure projects being developed by public finance, then some of these tools do not apply. So these are my final thoughts here.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. So I just want to say thank you to our panel. You've been absolutely wonderful today. I'm going to just say goodbye to the panel now while we announce our winners for today's competition. So thank you, panel. So for today, who were the lucky people? The lucky people were, here we go. Jorge Alejandro Navarro, you have won an exam. Wahoo, you also have, and Noor, you also have. So well done to you three. It is really great. So what we will do is reach out to you. We have your contact details. We will reach out to you and have a chat to you about which of the 3 certifications you're interested in doing. So well done to those 3 winners. We really appreciate your participation. So just before we close off, we have an upcoming event on Wednesday, the 30th of April at 2 o'clock British Summer Time. It's all about the NIST cybersecurity framework. So if you're interested in cybersecurity, then don't miss that one. That's for sure. It's always an interesting one. And over on our website, you can also search for the answers to over 3,000 questions now. It's a great free resource that you can use to help you with growing your career. So thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you joining today. Let us know if you have any further information that you'd like. Just get hold of us. Feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn and connect with us, and we'll help you wherever we can to understand more about growing your career with these 3 frameworks. Thanks, everybody.